All right, here we are with some live video, back with Chester Lynn in front of the OPS tree, which has done her job.
She was a good girl.
Yeah, that's what Chester said. She was a good girl. She did what she needed to do. There's this one little branch over there with some green ones on it, but everything else is done. So Chester, the purpose of today's live video is to talk about, for people to ask questions about how to grow their own figs. And some people sent me in questions ahead of time. One question was, how long, if you buy a tree in a pot from somebody, like from you or from John and Trudy, how long can you leave it in that pot before it needs to go in the ground?
Well, you can leave it in the pot for, if you have to, for a year or so. If you need to and you're not sure, you can put in a bigger pot and it can stay in a big pot almost forever.
Okay. So will it produce figs even in a big pot if it's big enough, if it's getting enough?
Will produce figs, yes. My favorite fig that I like, which come from my great-grandmother's, I had just a piece 3 or 4 inches and put it in a pot, and it had a fig on the front porch, and it weren't like 10 inches long, and the fig weren't 10 inches long, and it had a fig on it, and I was so proud. I mean.
Okay, so another question is, one person who was buying one, they wanted to know, they have a house over on the sound side, which sometimes gets some salt spray. So is that going to be bad for the tree? Can they put it on the water side of their house, or should they put it on the other side? And does it want full sun or part?
The salt spray won't hurt. Now, too much of anything will kill anything.
Right.
You know, we'll drain if we get out down the ocean and you get too much salt water, or too much water. But normally, the fig trees, they love the sandy soil. They do not like clay. They like the sandy soil. And they also like the salt, because actually, they're really native to the Middle East.
Right.
And what's over there? And all over there, salt mines,
Right. Okay. All right. Another question was, one guy said that he's having a hard time harvesting his figs before the ants get to them. And is there anything you can recommend for that?
I've had that happen too. I've never tried to do anything about it. I understand that, and I know that, they, like I say is, everybody for themselves. The ants, they got to get their thing too. And it's the same thing as birds. I mean, we put pipekins or things to keep the birds from doing it.
And netting sometimes, yeah.
And netting sometimes and all that. But then when it comes to the ants, the only thing that I can say with ants, it would probably be, and I don't like to say this, but Lord forgive me for having to say it, but I don't like to cut all the limbs from laying on the ground, because when they lay on the ground they root, and then you can share them and give them to other people.
Right.
But if it's just got one trunk, that's less you have to tend to keep the ants out of that tree.
Oh, that's true. So you could put a little something around the ring, and a ring around the trunk, like
you could do some things that put some stuff out there that ants don't.
So the ants can't crawl up. Okay.
And they wouldn't crawl up.
I would say when ants get on my figs, I just rinse them off.
Well,
But sometimes when the figs have split open, they're inside, and then that's gross. But when they're on the outside, I just rinse them off.
This one thing has happened. We've never had it happen that I know of before. I've never noticed it. We're having fig rust, which is a blight. It's a fungus.
Right.
And there are a lot of it. And I don't know if it's because we had so much tide last year, or we had so much rain and all through the winter and early spring.
We did have a lot of rain, yeah.
I mean, but they are all over. There's a lot of trees that are having problems with that. And the foliage, I don't think it'll hurt. I don't know how much it'll hurt the tree, other than it looks bad. And
is that when the leaves have that rusty look, or on the fig fruit?
Leaves turn yellow.
Right.
They have brown spots on them and fall, and they can fall a lot. But they tell you what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to keep that tree raked and keep it clean. And I think one of the things I think really that is detrimental to a tree is making sure you pick the figs off the tree. You do not let the figs lay on that tree and rot and fall to the ground, because then you are causing blights and other things
Right, okay.
to multiply in that environment.
Okay, so when I find a fig that's already been bitten into by birds or is already kind of moldy or rotten, I usually just toss it under the tree, but I shouldn't do that. I should put it in my compost instead.
Away from the tree.
Okay. All right, good to know.
Don't put it under the tree, because you can be causing other stuff to live there that you don't want on that tree.
Right. Okay, that's good to know. All right, how about sunny shade, part shade, out of the wind? Because you said this one does well here because it's between two buildings.
It's a lot of all day sun, and both buildings block it. When it was put here, this building weren't here. But I don't really know why it's done so good, but it has done good. And
it's a happy tree.
It is a piece off my grape from out of my yard, and so I actually, it belongs to preservation. I actually don't know that. I consider it almost mine.
Yeah.
Because of my tenant doing me giving it to, and I fertilize it because can't do it, don't ask permission.
Right. So tell me about fertilizer. If someone's tree is doing poorly, what would you recommend that they do?
First, I would make sure that when you water it, the water can puddle around it when you water it. So the water's not running off of it, it's staying closer to the roots of it. Then I would say in February, get some, I like a garden fertilizer, any of that, and put around it, not to the trunk of the tree.
Okay.
But from like 2 foot to 3 foot to 4 foot to 5 foot, if it's got some size to it and it's still not doing good, put it in that space.
So out like at the branch line around it? Okay. All right, that makes sense.
And under the branch line, and you can do it a couple in February, you can do it 2-3 times to let the rain wash it in the ground.
Okay. And what's the best time to plant your tree? If you bought a tree in a pot? Okay, anytime.
The only thing is don't go plant it and then come up in September and tell me it died during August.
Because you didn't water it.
It died because you didn't tend to it.
Okay. Yeah, because if you plant it in the heat of the summer, it will need watering.
If you plant it in the heat of the summer, you've got to get out there and water it, and it needs to be watered all the time. Whether you want it or not, it'll die from lack of water.
Right. And of course, we talked about this before, but local people would put their clam and oyster shells under it, which fed them from the leftover juice.
The leftover clams and oyster juice and all that from out the shells actually is wonderful for the tree, and it's free fertilizer. And then the shells do two or three other things. When the shells fall to the ground, they'll actually eventually sink in the ground, and they'll keep the wind from blowing the roots and the tree out of the ground.
Right.
Another thing, every fish cleaning bench on Ocracoke, when we were kids, was near a fig tree.
So they like all that fish juice.
Because when they clean it, when they were cleaning their fish, they claimed they were feeding it to the cats, and they threw it under the fig tree. Really what was happening, the cats may eat a little bit of it. The rest of it rotted and went and fertilized the fig tree.
Right.
I remember Granddaddy doing it all the time, and I knew that was happening, that fertilizer was going to the bottom of that tree because of that seafood,
Right. So if you had fish guts from cleaning fish, you could bury it next to your tree. That'd help. If you don't want to smell it, you can bury it. Yeah. Okay, so wait, I'm trying to think of another question. One of them was, you mentioned that you don't like cutting the low branches because you can layer them, but can you train the tree up so that it's more of a tree shape and less of a bush shape if you want to?
You can do that.
Okay.
It's not something I like to do necessarily, but it can be done, and is done some, on Ocracoke, the trees are more bushes than they are actually trees, because here, because of wind and all that, we don't get, and then if you only have one trunk, and this happened in the 80s, it was like 60 some degrees. Within 2 hours, it got to 5 degrees.
Ooh, yikes.
And maybe 2 hours, 2.5, 3 hours, or something like that. It went down to 5 degrees. And what happened, all the fig trees busted. The trunks, some froze and busted.
Yeah.
And if you've got one trunk, you've lost your tree.
Right.
Except the root come and sit in shoes like. But then...
And which it will, eventually.
Which it will. But the thing that is that if you leave it and you let, several trunks of it, go, you might lose one or two, you won't lose them all.
Right.
So
Okay.
you won't lose them all.
That's good to know. And that has happened with my tree. We've had big pieces break off in storms, and it still had the main section.
The wood's real brittle, so a hard gale can get caught. In September, like happened a year ago. We didn't have that much wind, but wind can catch all that foliage and top that whole tree right over.
Yeah. Okay. And now for people who are maybe buying a tree and taking it off the island to plant at home, what should they do to amend their soil in order to make it?
Make sure they have light and airy soil. The fig tree likes light and airy soil. It definitely don't have to be. It don't have to be sandy soil, but it does not like clay heavy soil. The roots like to get air.
Okay.
So that's the whole idea. Is so it's light and airy, and that's the reason they do so good here.
Right.
Is because it's a sandy soil environment, other than
Right.
some dirt in it, but
right. It's a mixture.
It's a mixture.
So is there a product, or would you just say sand from would the garden center sell sand? I don't know.
I would say mend that soil before you put the fig tree in it. Knowing what's in it, and dig enough space. And if you have to, you can put it in a pot for if you're not sure about doing it. Put it in like a half a barrel or something like that. Because if that tree, the roots get pot bound, it'll actually produce figs more quicker.
Okay.
Because the tree in its mindset will think it needs to produce seed to keep from going extinct.
Right.
Nature does that,
Right. So it's producing figs instead of roots. Right.
So it will produce. I've seen that happen.
Okay.
Where trees were struggling, but they were having so much fruit on them, it was weird, But
Right.
that's what it was. It was nature telling that tree that it was scared it weren't. Because if there's some trees on the island, they're so healthy that they don't have a lot of fruit on them because they don't need to. It's
Right.
in the growth.
Right. Okay. That's good. That's a good point. I think that's what mine did this year. It put all its energy into growing bigger after the storm because we didn't have that many figs. We did have some, but not as many as we usually do. Marcy Brenner has a question here, a live question. If she brings you a fig from her tree, can you tell her what kind it is?
I can do my best if it's something I'm familiar with. I certainly don't know every fig there is on the island. Or there is in the world. And if it's one I'm familiar with, I can tell you if it is something that grows on the island, or if it's something that doesn't grow on the island. Every once in a while I still find one that I found one today. I had known about it, but I went and I found one today.
Where was that? Where was that?
That was in Jackson Track.
Okay.
And it was a fig that I have not seen on the island before. It's not legal for me to go in anybody's yard and snoop,
Right.
And I can't put my legs down. I used to it anyhow, but now
Of
with
course.
my legs I can't. But I do try to ride around and investigate trees that are, because there was 2-3 fig trees on the island that were real famous. Now they are getting scarcer because all the people moving in, buying the houses, they put septic tanks in and they drain fields in, they cut the tree down and take rid of the tree. Then they go to the garden center, get a tree.
That might not be one of the originals.
It's not one of the ones they took out. It's a more of a Celeste or a brown turkey, more of a modern.
So which are the oldest ones, the ones that have been here the longest? The pound fig?
The pound fig is definitely one.
Mm-hmm.
The little tiny sugar fig is another.
Like this one, right?
This one here is another. There is a lemon fig that's been up a long time.
Okay.
I think really the proper name is white Marcellus. Really, I think is what it is.
Okay.
There's a brown turkey that has been on the island for a long time, and there's a difference in between some different versions of different brown turkeys. The one particular one's been on Ocracoke for a long time, since probably 1700s, and so has that. And there's one or two that have been here a long time, but never been propagating much.
Okay.
There's a blue fig that's been here.
Yeah, I have a blue.
It has been right good many years, but it's not. It's never propagated a lot.
Right.
So the biggest one that propagated the most was the pine fig, because it was a big purple fig.
Right.
And people wanted to get enough figs to produce
Right.
a peck of figs.
Yeah.
And it didn't take many big pine figs to make a peck. And
Right.
so then that way that was real easy. So that's what they did.
Right.
I remember yards having 10 or 12 big fig trees in that one yard.
Right. And I will also put in a plug for Chester's book, Figments of Ocracoke, which you can get from here at the OPS gift shop or from Books to Be Read in the variety store. There are pictures in there, photographs of some.
It's not in Books to Be Read.
It's not a Books to Be Read?
No.
But it's a variety store?
It's in the variety store and Village Craftsman.
Village Craftsman. Okay, that's it. That you can go there, and there are photos of the different fig trees on the island with identification, which can help. But also, yeah, Chester's he's a good resource. He's the one who told me what I had all those years ago.
The book is written in the Ocracoke Grove, and it's got the QR code in it. It's on a smartphone. You can scan it and hear different stories. That Walt Wolf from the English professor at NC State's been coming to Ocracoke for over 25 years and taping me and some other people, and all of my tapes that he done are in it. There's some different stories.
That's right. I'm going to share some of those links on our Facebook page so that people can get them. Yeah. All right. Let's see. Were there any other questions? Let me think. Just about everything. Another question was from somebody local. If their tree is struggling, could they get you to come look at it sometime and tell them what to do?
I can do that. I can certainly do
Yeah.
that.
Because they've been trying, and it's not. It's like they've had a couple trees and they feel like they're not planting it in the right spot.
I can certainly do that. If somebody wants me to, I don't mind doing that.
And Chester's going to be back in his house soon. You can talk about that.
In the name of the Lord, I'm hoping. This has been a rough year.
It has.
I sat on my bed in the hurricane. The tide was coming up on the mattress I was sitting on, and I took my cane right here and plucked the shoes that were floating by me off the top of the water and put them on. So it's been a rough year, but the house is almost done, and so we're going to have some fun. And then next year, I promised myself to try to root some fig trees. I've been in like 6 or 7 different locations,
right?
And I did work where I can root them and tend them, and I miss it myself, and I miss being able to have people come in my shop and talk to me, and I miss that part. I like that, and I miss that part, and then I have some artifacts that I can museum to, and I miss people coming in and talking to me about all that.
Yeah, so hopefully you can get back in there, get settled, get your shop open again.
I'm looking forward to it.
Marcy says that she enjoys visiting with you when you're on your fig scuds. Maybe you could tell our people who might not know what a scud is, what that means.
Well, the scud is when I take my golf cart and I just check and ride around the village, and it's what we call taking a scud.
Yeah, it's just seeing and being seen, riding around the village.
Yeah,
You can take a beach scud, or you can take a scud around the village.
There is no destination to
Yeah.
a scud. A scud is to where you end up at and where you want
There you go.
to continue to go to.
Yes. Lovely to take an evening scud in the golf cart down, maybe to see the sunset, see the lighthouse, check out figs.
It's been real hot here lately, but it'll certainly won't be long and start getting a little bit cooler,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So are there any figs that are, I know this is one of the ones that produces fruit earliest. Which is the latest producer?
The latest one is the one at the Thurston House.
Okay.
There's a fig tree there and that one can produce like from the latter part of September or even mid-October.
Wow.
And the pine fig, if that's growing good, it can produce a third crop in October and November.
Wow. Okay.
I had a friend of mine. I was picking figs and carrying and getting them down. I put them in the freezer because I only be getting a certain amount every day, but I was going to give her enough figs for the pickup. And one of the local historians on the island said, "No, that Chester, he's not picking them this time of year."
Hmm.
And he was one of the island historians.
Hmm.
And I proved him wrong.
Wow.
Because my neighbor behind my house watched me pick them.
That wasn't Philip Howard, was it?
Huh?
It wasn't Philip Howard, was it?
No,
Okay.
No, it was Ward Garish.
Oh, okay.
And
Yes, because Ward Garrish liked his island history. Yeah,
and
for
Ronnie
sure.
Faulkner behind my house
Right.
watched me pick the figs.
Okay.
So I had proof,
Yeah. All right. That's good to know. So
That
some of them can
always
produce.
happen,
Right. Yeah. Most figs are, like, we were worried that our fig tree wasn't going to do much. And first day of August, we walked out and we're like, look, they're figs. I mean, it's like you can set your watch by it.
I will tell if a fig tree's struggling and you fertilize it and it starts to put some new growth out to where the bottom of the root of it, in the name of God, do not cut that off.
Okay.
Those new growth will grow because sometimes the old growth will get stunted and hard to grow.
Okay.
But that new growth will grow easier.
Okay.
And make sure when you do that, that you don't let nobody near it with a weed eater.
Right.
It burns me up when they take and cut the bark around of something with a weed eater, and that
Yeah.
kills it because that's like cutting your skin.
So about cutting back a tree, because sometimes you need to, like ours rubs up against our roof and stuff. What time of year is the best time?
Well, it's really best to do it in the fall or sometime in the winter when it's storming.
Okay.
If you have to do it, you can't do that all the time.
Right.
But if you have to, you can do that. But it's really best to do that because sometimes you just need to shape the tree so that. And some people they'll cut the higher limbs because they can't pick figs. But then a lot of people leave them because the birds can eat them.
That's the way I feel. Yeah.
And I can argue about birds eating figs all until one thing. Till I see a cardinal go fly in that tree and start eating, he's got to eat too.
Yeah. I had a cardinal in mine.
He's so pretty and he's red and all that, and he can have a fig. I mean, the Lord give him some too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In a good fig season, there's plenty to share with the birds.
That's the whole thing, and there are a lot of figs on the island, and the thing of it is, I noticed there's a lot of fig trees on the island that people have not been tended to.
Right.
The vines are taking them, and they need to get them in, and they haven't, figs, I don't think figs rotting on a tree ain't good.
Right.
It will eventually cause that tree to grow down.
Okay. Good to know. Get out there and pick the figs, and if you have a neighbor who isn't picking their figs, ask if you can.
To an old oakhopper, that is almost like you have become a communist.
Yeah. Unforgivable.
But it's unforgivable because figs were at one time. Now you can go to the store and buy different preserves and all that. You could not do that here at one time on Ocracoke. You had to preserve what you had, and you had to survive and do. And so the figs were an important part of the food and stuff that grew up on the island, where people could pass it on and have it for dead of winter.
Was there any other fruit that people grew on the island back in the old days?
In the old days, there was a lot of blackberries and dewberries.
Oh, I remember the blackberry bramble. All that's been cleared out from
The reason we don't have
development.
it now is because the horses are not loose.
Oh.
The horses mowed them sand dunes, and they ate all the grass off the top of them. They didn't eat the blackberries or dewberries because they were thorny.
Right.
And so they ate everything above it. So they kept everything pruned, and the dewberries would cover them like blankets. And on a Sunday after church, when it was time to pick them, the whole island would be down there in big pots picking all the blackberries and dewberries we could pick.
Right.
And then everybody would make blackberry dumplings with egg sauce.
I love that egg sauce.
And in the name of God, it's absolutely addictively wonderful.
It is. It is wonderful. Maybe I'll share that recipe, even though it's blackberries and not figs. That egg sauce is worth sharing. Yeah, the property next to us, which is now Zillie's, used to have a bunch of blackberry bramble that I would pick. Yeah, I had a bunch in there.
And then some people, there were some apples and there were some pears on the island. There were a lot of cooking pears on the island at one time. Those were the main things. There were a few plum trees on the island
Plums.
That grew, you're right much, but it was mostly figs was the top number one thing, because there were some yards that I may had 8-10 big fig trees in it.
Right. Okay. Marcy has a question that John Simpson took a picture of the figs and that won our photo contest, and she wanted to know if there are any more of those on the island.
Yes, there is. The Cadota fig is in between greenish, a little bit yellowish greenish, and there is, I know of maybe 7 or 8 on the island.
Okay.
I'm not figuring it could be maybe a few more.
Do they taste as good as the other figs?
They are absolutely almost too sweet.
Really? Okay. All right.
They're shockingly sweet.
Okay. Sweeter than a sugar fig, which is like a sugar bomb?
Huh?
Sweeter than the sugar fig?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
I say they're almost too sweet.
Okay.
The only thing about the Cadota fig is I don't know, I've never got any that was cooked up in preserves, so I don't know how that tastes, kind of thing.
Okay. Right. We don't know how they do in preserves.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd like that or not.
Okay. All right.
I don't know if it would be too sweet,
All right, somebody out there, make your Cadota fig preserves and bring some to Chester.
I'm sure there's several that have, because I know 2-3 people. I don't want to give them right, but I know that there's people who live down the road from me that have done that, and I'm sure she's preserved figs and all that stuff, but I've never tried it, so I don't know.
All right. Well, I think we'll be...
And the Cadota fig is really from Israel.
It's from Israel, right? Yeah. It's an Israeli fig, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Varieties,
All right, so I'm going to stop this. I'm actually running out of battery, and we've been going for a while, and we don't have any more questions, so I'm going to say goodbye. If you have any more questions for Chester, you can comment here, and I can ask him another time, and we'll get your answers back on the Facebook page.
And if you're on the island, stop him on the road somewhere.
Stop him on the road when you see him going by on his scud.
You'll see me taking a scud, and just stop me and say, hold on here.
All right. Thank you, Chester.